Great. Apparently the answer is not. And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Deeper Dive in the exact same time slot as the MLB Strategy Show. I am Josh Engelman. I am joined by Neil Orfield, so this show is significantly better than when we have Adam. So yeah, right out of the gate, things are better. We got a 6-game early slate. There's basically no main slate tonight, so this is the main slate. I think there's 2 games at 7 o'clock. I will certainly not be playing that tonight. So yeah, yay for me, night off. Either way, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. And then be prepared to talk a little bit about Odd Shopper, but that's not happening for like 20 more minutes. So put a pin in that. Neil, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm getting a little bit of shit in the chat. Not really. Blitz saying Neil made it because on Tuesday I was listed as being on the show. I just didn't know that until 2 minutes before the show started. So Adam ended up doing a great job. I don't think he knew he was on the show, and then he did a great job somehow with no notice. So I guess he's a pro at this. He's done it long enough, despite your compliments of me. As I was telling you before the show, this is way too early. About 2 weeks ago, this is about when I would be waking up. Maybe even I'd still be sleeping in. I'm still adjusting to the Stokastic full-time schedule, having to wake up in time to do a 10 o'clock show, but I'm getting there.
I don't want to tell everybody how the sausage is made too much, but when it comes to Adam, there is no preparation before the show, whether he knows he's on it or not. And I know he's not going to hear this, but it didn't make a difference at all whether or not he knew he was on that show. So he actually thought he was on the show. 2 separate schedules, 2 separate groups of people on that show. He thought he was doing that show with Greg. I thought I was doing the show with you. Turns out the answer was a mishmash of both of those things, and I was doing the show with Adam.
Nice.
So it all worked out in the end, but yeah, it wouldn't have made a difference. He would have just prepared on the fly like he does every other day.
It's impressive to me as somebody who tries to prepare. He still seems like he's totally ready for every show. So I guess I've got some work cut out for me. Some years ahead of me to get used to doing content on the fly.
Do you want to know why it's so easy for Adam? And this isn't even going to be a joke either. Normally I'm teeing this up as something to take a shit on Adam for, but
yeah, let's hear it.
The answer is because we have such great stuff at Stokastic.com. He can pull up our projections, pull up ownership, top stacks, top pitchers, and boom. You've got everything that you could possibly want for the slate in front of you, ready to go. So he can come in here without having looked at it because all of the work has already been done for him.
Yeah, that is true.
Sell job.
I mean, that's usually the way I play MLB DFS is I look at the top stacks tool, I look at the top pitchers tool, and that tells me everything I need to know. I can do that live. I can interpret that live just fine. So yeah, you're right. It is because the tools make it pretty easy.
There it is. Well, we've got 6 games to break down today. I'm hoping that it goes better than the 6 games that I broke down for myself yesterday in the early slate. So I'm ready to dive in if you are.
Yeah, let's do it.
Whatever can keep me away from watching my golf lineups go up in flames and what I would imagine to be my tennis lineups over the next 54 minutes. Here goes nothing. Phillies and Marlins. 4.4 run implied total for the Phillies, 3.5 for the Marlins. Kyle Gibson and Edward Cabrera going here. Both pitchers pulling some ownership as well. 28% right now going to Gibson. He is 8K. On the opposite side of this one, Cabrera at 8,600, pulling about 14% ownership. I'll just open it up to you. Do you have a preference between these 2 pitchers?
Yeah, it would be Cabrera for me would be the preference. He's a little bit more of an unknown. He's a better strikeout pitcher than Kyle Gibson. I just don't think Kyle Gibson is all that good. So if I have to choose between these 2, it's going to be Edward Cabrera. I'm seeing him at 10% ownership. So I just refreshed, and it looks like right now we've got him at 10% projected ownership, at least in the top pitchers tool, and 20% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the slate. So he looks fantastic in the top pitchers tool. He has a 60 out of 60 fastball grade on Fangraphs. 4 career starts, but 26.7% strikeout rate so far in his career. He's a better pitcher. Kyle Gibson, pretty far behind him in all the metrics I care about. 18.4% strikeout rate, just kind of a mediocre MLB pitcher. We kind of know who Kyle Gibson is, so I will take the upside with Edward Cabrera and his 20% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. How about you? Do you have a preference between these 2?
Well, let's see. I'm going to update all of that data that apparently updated since I put it into my sheet. Not that it moved all that much, but I had whatever we did 9 minutes ago and not this updated version. So let me dump this in here right now. I was light on both of these guys on the first run through, and that appears to still be the case. I have slightly more Gibson than I do Cabrera, but if Cabrera's at 10, then I'm at 12. So basically neutral to Cabrera, a bit under on Gibson. I'm with you. I just don't think he's all that good. And the Marlins aren't bad. They're not great. They're just sort of like an average offense in my purview. So I've got 17% Gibson on my dummy crunch, 12% Cabrera, but Gibson doesn't project all that well via Steamer. 19% projected K rate, league average projected FIP. So on a 6-game slate where both pitchers can go starter depth and they don't have any sort of like problematic prices, I'm going to have both guys, but I am much more heavily exposed to the top 2 pitchers on this slate today, at least at this moment.
Yep. I haven't run any crunches. I imagine I will be too. I think that I will go out of my way. So I haven't done a crunch yet, and I'm not going to do it live. In the past I've tried to do that, and I think that is what causes my computer to crash midstream. So I'm not going to try to run a crunch. But just like looking at these pitchers, I have more interest in Edward Cabrera at 10%. It's interesting. The Marlins have a 3.4 run implied total. The Phillies are at 4.3. So I guess based on the line, you would expect Kyle Gibson to probably be better. But I just think Edward Cabrera is more of an unknown. We kind of know who Kyle Gibson is. So of the two of them, give me Edward Cabrera. But I think that makes sense to have some of each of these guys. I mean, it's a pretty low total game to begin with. So yeah, I'll probably have some of both.
Yeah, based on Cabrera's stuff, I think he's got a little bit more upside than Gibson. You feel a little bit safer just because the Marlins are worse than the Phillies for Gibson. So you're kind of looking at it two sides of a coin here. What I can say is that it doesn't appear that either one of these teams is pulling all that much ownership. The Phillies are 7th in aggregate ownership, 6th in our top stack tool. Rhys Hoskins got to 10%. He's the only guy in this game, whether it's for the Phillies or for the Marlins, that made it to double digits in ownership. And again, Rhys Hoskins hit it on the number 10.0. So I had the Phillies in my top stack tool at 7th. I don't see much else here. It's not a team that I'm really getting to all that much. I've got some respect for Cabrera. So I don't really think that I'll be prioritizing the Phillies or the Marlins. I'll get there early here. I don't expect to have a ton of offense in this one at all. Do you see anything different here for the Phillies? Do the Marlins become interesting to you because of Gibson's ownership? I'm curious where you land for this one.
So yeah, I would say the Marlins I have some interest in. The Phillies look pretty bad in the top stacks tool, the Stokastic top stacks tool, different than Josh's proprietary top stacks. The Phillies are near the bottom, third from the bottom, 5.2% projected ownership, 3.6% chance of being a top stack. The top stack. So Phillies look pretty bad in the top stack tool. Miami is neutral in terms of their odds of being the top stack, 4.3% ownership, 4.3% top stack odds. But then they have a 24% chance of being the top point per dollar stack on the slate. So that makes me sort of interested in Miami. I'm trying to see who would I even pay for? I mean, obviously Cease and then Framber Valdez. Is he the Yeah, he's number 2 on the slate. So I guess you can go to the Marlins and pair up Cease and Framber Valdez is probably a reason to go to the Marlins just because they are the pretty clear top 2 pitchers. I kind of like Merrill Kelly too. But yeah, I guess I have some interest in the Marlins just as a stack that allows me to get to a better secondary stack or better one-offs and better starting pitchers. So if I'm playing one of these two teams, it is definitely the Marlins, just given their 24% chance of being a top point per dollar stack. That is pretty massive.
Even with my heavy exposure to Cease and Valdez at this moment, I'm still not getting to this Marlins team. I'm basically right in line with the public from a pitching exposure perspective. Only I'm getting slightly more Zach Greinke, which makes me want to drink bleach, but whatever. I'm just taking a bigger stand on 2 different stacks. We'll get to those teams in a bit, but I don't think that I'm going to need the value bats from the Marlins. I think I can find some value elsewhere that has a little bit higher of a ceiling.
Okay, and that's one of those things that I might have learned also if I had run crunches prior to this. But I mean, just based on the raw numbers, the 24% chance of being the top point per dollar stack, I have some interest in. You could also I mean, I assume you're running 5-man stacks if you are on DraftKings. Maybe they'd be more interesting as a 4-man stack, like if you do a 4-4 kind of lineup with the Marlins, just because then you can get 4 bats from a better stack and use the Marlins as value. But yeah, I have little interest in the Phillies. I just looking at these numbers, I have some interest in Miami. I haven't actually crunched though, so I don't know how much. I think I would like to get over the field in a 150 set, but I also don't think they're probably a lineup that I'm going to in my first 5 lineups.
80% of the lineups that I crunch are 5-mans, 20% are 4-mans.
Okay, and you're not getting to the Marlins as 4-mans either?
I got them once.
Okay.
But this will calm down once I get to like my actual crunch and take a look at everything. But I am inundated with the Rockies today.
Josh, I want to interrupt baseball for just 1 second because Stephen Liebowitz just asked a question that I have been wondering and haven't remembered to ask. Do you have your lip tat? I thought that was going to be like a public thing. I thought you were going to do it in Chicago and it was going to be like public and it was going to be recorded for us.
We tried. So the final day that we were all in Chicago, myself, Adam, Jordan, Nick Lepre, Rinpack for a bit, Brody on the back end too. Nobody knows who Brody is, but a graphics guy. We were all at the golf simulator and we tried to find a tattoo parlor that would do the tattoo. Jordan and Nick called countless tattoo parlors in Chicago. All of them said no to giving me the lip tattoo. So we couldn't find anything to do on Chicago. So that was the plan. We tried to hunt it down. Everyone said no.
So even unrecorded, was it because it was going to be recorded, or is it just because it was a lip tattoo?
Lip tattoo. They had no idea that we would have recorded anything.
Interesting. I didn't realize that would be so hard to find.
Neither did I. I thought it was just a no-brainer. So we'll figure out when that's going to happen. Maybe we'll put it on ice until the beginning of the NBA season. But I have no problem getting it done. The day after it happens, assuming that it doesn't hurt anymore, I'll never remember that I have it. It's just gone. It's just going to exist and not matter at all.
You'll go to canker sore at some point and you'll pull down your lip. Oh yeah, I've got a tattoo there.
Yeah, maybe. Frank says I got a Prince Albert instead. I would need a lot of money for that bad boy.
Oh God, yeah. It took me a second to remember what that is. I was like, yeah, I know this term. Yeah, no thanks.
It's that one's not for me.
Yeah, me neither.
I got nothing else in this game, Phillies or Marlins, and I don't really see many cash game options. Coors is probably going to be the primary cash. It's probably 8 guys, maybe an Astro or 2, but I don't really have any cash options in this one. Gibson, I guess, could in theory be one of those things, but it seems to me like Dylan Cease and Framber Valdez is the pretty clear cash combo on DraftKings.
Yeah, that I don't play cash, so I mean it's for me. You just kind of like run the optimal, right? And you pick one of the top 10 optimal lineups, and whichever one seems safest to you. It's kind of how you play cash. You don't even
for me. It's going to be some sort of combination of about as high as you could possibly project a lineup with some swaps for just like taking guys with bigger ownership. Like if I have player X at 10 fantasy points and player B at 9.9, but the guy at 9.9 is 25% owned and my guy is 5, then I should be playing the other guy. That works for me in GPPs, but on the opposite side of that one, I sort of just want to bring that one to the top, depending on what kind of cash game I'm playing too. But
sure. Interesting.
It's going to be different in a head-to-head in comparison to like a 50-50 or a double up. I also don't play baseball cash, but that is what I would be doing.
Yeah.
All of it's set up. I just don't enter it. But the process is there. It's also a show that you guys can watch Monday through Friday at sometime in the morning whenever I wake up, because it's not like basketball. I'm not going live at 6:30 a.m. during baseball season with a process show. Crazy people. That I need my sleep right now. But 2 more months and we'll be back for it.
You don't do a baseball process show?
I do a process show. It is not live. And it's sort of just like whatever's going on. I take a look at my lineups from the night before, preview contests in different sports. So like today I looked at the MMA contests for Saturday. Tomorrow I'll probably look at baseball contests, maybe like round 2 showdown, depending on how early I get up. But NBA is 6:30 in real work.
I can imagine, yeah.
It sucks. Live before lock coming up next. That'll be at 12 p.m. That will take you all the way up to the 1 o'clock lock or 1:05 or whatever time it is. You guys know it's baseball. So sometime after 1 p.m. MMA strategy show will be at 1:30. Got a UFC card this Saturday. And then preseason NFL live before lock coming up tonight at 6 p.m. If you guys are looking for free content today, our MLB projections are free. 430 people in here, by the way, 54 likes. That's not going to get it done. Hit that thumbs up. I think 80 is in the cards right now on this ask. Let's run it up to 80 as we go on to game number 2. Tigers and Guardians. I've got a 3.8 run implied total for the Tigers, 4.7 for the Guardians. Garrett Hill and Zach Plesac. No ownership going to Hill right now. He is 6,200. On the opposite side of this one, Plesac is 21% owned at 6,900. I greatly prefer Plesac in the overall scheme of things. I do have a little bit of Garrett Hill, but I don't really like it considering there's not a lot of strikeouts in this Cleveland lineup. How do you feel about the 20-ish% owned Plesac?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I mean, Plesac is not a good pitcher. 17.6% strikeout rate, 5.45 expected ERA, 1.35 WHIP. So don't usually love playing Plesac, but the Tigers are just terrible against righties. 67 WRC plus against righties is just awful. 3.9 run implied total. So I get it why he's getting that kind of ownership, and he's only 6,900. So those are the reasons to play Plesac. He doesn't have huge upside, but he could probably reach 18 fantasy points, and that would be enough at 6,900. So the ownership makes sense to me on this slate.
Yeah, I came in about 5% below the field. Something in the 17% range seems totally reasonable to me. I liked him a little bit less in my personal top pitchers tool, but not enough that I'm going to be getting away from him. I think in the grand scheme of things, something in that 15-ish% chance of being a top 2 pitcher makes some sense to me. And the price tag works. Do you see yourself getting to Hill at all? I'm a little bit surprised that I had 7% because I just didn't think that he would profile all that well against the Guardians, but it is showing up. Seems like another spot that I could potentially pay down.
Wait, how many games has Hill pitched? He's pitched 6 games. Okay, because his numbers are awful. I'm trying to figure out why he looks really good in the top pitchers tool. I'm looking at his numbers, and he's got 12.3% strikeout rate so far in his MLB career, which again is only 6 games. So maybe it doesn't mean it, but 1.39 WHIP, 6.4 expected ERA, just not great numbers across the board for Garrett Hill so far. And he's going up against the Guardians. That is not an easy matchup. So there is nothing about Garrett Hill that makes me want to play him, except for the top pitchers tool, where he is projected for 1.7% ownership, 11.2% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the slate. That part's surprising. It doesn't surprise me that he's 22.9% chance of being a top 2 point per dollar pitcher just because he's only 6,200. But the 11.2% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the slate tells me there's probably something that I'm missing here. He's probably got a better profile than what I'm seeing. But just looking at he doesn't. Okay. I don't get it. I don't get why his top 2% is so high then. Tough matchup, bad pitcher. 6,200 is really all that I like about him. So I don't see myself getting to a lot of Garrett Hill, but the top pitchers tool likes him better than I do. So and the top pitchers tool knows more than I do. So if you get to him, I wouldn't pull him out of your lineup. If you have 6,200 left over, he's probably who you play there. But I'm definitely not going on a way to get him.
Okay. Yeah, I had 7%. If he maintains a sub 2% ownership, that's probably where I'll end up being. I'm actually even more pessimistic than our top pitchers tool, but I did get some. So it's possible you're going to see some Garrett Hill in your lineups today.
He's not even the cheap. There's 3 cheaper pitchers than him. So usually I can kind of understand why the numbers are giving me what they give me, but this is kind of perplexing me.
I don't really have Hudson or Cole Reagans, but I do have Zach Greinke, and I am not excited to talk about it. Then again, I did recommend the Royals on the run line on my betting video last night. So apparently I'm a big Zach Greinke fan. By the way, that line has moved pretty dramatically. So you guys should have got on there early, which is the entire point of that video. Check it out on the Odd Shopper channel. Stock Cleveland Bats, they are 3rd in our top stack tool, 3rd in aggregate ownership. Now, we know that Jose Ramirez is going to get ownership. He does every single slate, and he should. He's just really good. He is 19% owned, and at least in the discussion of being a cash third baseman. We'll see how that actually looks when we get to Rockies and Cardinals. How do you feel about this Cleveland stack today against Garrett Hill?
Yeah, hard not to like it. I mean, I always like Cleveland stacks against bad pitchers. I mean, they're just a great team. They can put up huge numbers. And this is about as good of a matchup as they could possibly have. The only thing not to like about Cleveland is that they are getting 10.8% projected ownership with a 9.6% chance of being the top stack on the board, 5.1% chance of being the top point per dollar stack on the board. But they're still just a good enough team. And 10.8% is not such high ownership on a 6-game slate that I'm going to shy away or try to avoid them if I'm going to get as much Cleveland as Fantasy Cruncher will give me. Neutral in the top stacks tool, and they're just a good team against a bad pitcher. I don't know what else you really need to say there. Going up against Garrett Hill, the matchup doesn't get much better. So I do definitely have some interest in Cleveland. They're probably one of my top 4 stacks on the day.
Okay. I actually had them. It's weird. I have them 4th in my top stack tool, so a spot behind us, but with slightly higher top stack odds.
Interesting.
We have 10.5%.
Do I need to? Maybe I need to refresh again.
It's possible that you are refreshing more frequently. That like once I paste it into my sheet, I just go and I don't really think about it too much. So
no, third.
From a rank perspective too, like it doesn't really matter. But yeah, I have them 0.2% ahead, but 1 spot behind in rank. Ultimately, the exact same numbers here.
Yeah. Nice. That's good. Confirmation.
The Tigers on the opposite side, though, 8th in aggregate ownership, 10th in our top stack tool. They are 2nd, though, in value. I am getting to the Tigers here more than I'm getting to Cleveland. I'm getting to the Tigers more than I'm getting to, say, the Marlins in the previous game. I think most of that has to do with, one, they're free. Pretty easy to stack up to. Like Javi Baez at 4,600 is the most expensive guy there. After you get to Riley Green at 3,900, everybody's in the 2s. And I'm taking at least a little bit of advantage against Zach Plesac's 20% ownership. So for right now, I am getting to the Tigers. I am, let's call it like 1.8 times the field in terms of aggregate ownership, but I do have them in some 5-mans. This is the value stack that I'm more likely to get to in comparison to the Marlins. I don't really see a huge difference between those two things. It just so happens that I'm getting to the Tigers a little bit.
Interesting. Yeah. So I mean, Zach Plesac is not good. So I get that. Detroit is so bad against righties, but I mean, can they really be this bad? Can they have to be better than they have been so far this year. So maybe this is a get right spot for Detroit. Based on the numbers, I'm more inclined to go to Miami than Detroit, but I haven't actually looked at the lineups. Maybe does Detroit have a cheaper lineup? Is that because that might be the reason that you're not getting to Miami and you are getting to Detroit, is that Detroit, even though Miami has better top value odds, they could still be just a more expensive team. So it's hard for me to do this without.
I think it's basically the same. Like we had the Marlins at 21% top value. We had the Tigers at 20. Like I think it's just sort of different versions of the same thing. Depending on where ownership is coming in, it's just sort of like bumping up both sides of it. If I look at,
Plesac is 21.
I mean, the Marlins, 3 of the 9 bats in the Marlins lineup are first base only. So you kind of naturally get less lineups that you could possibly play with the Marlins. And I think that plays a bit of a role. They only have 2 outfield bats. One of them is in the 9 hole. So that's mildly limiting as well.
That makes sense. So yeah, and that's probably why they're getting such low ownership, is just because of those factors. You said 3 that are first base only for Miami. That's a very limiting factor. And only 2 outfielders and 1. Yeah, that's okay.
Let me make sure that's right, because Miami didn't have a lineup when we first started the show. So Cooper, yes. Lewin Diaz. Okay, so it is just 2 now. When I update the Marlins lineup, that might change a little bit, but I had it in as Cooper, Aguilar, and Diaz all as first base only. So that was probably the driving force. And then I assume now that that's not the case, I will simply just generate more Marlins lineups that can show up for me.
Okay. Yeah, I think it makes sense to get to Detroit. And they are very similar to Miami in that both are leverage on pretty high owned pitchers, and they're relatively cheap. I think that the Miami bats are better, so I lean towards Miami if I'm deciding between Miami and Detroit. But the fact that they do have only 2 outfielders and 2 players who are first base only eligible at first base. Maybe Detroit's just a little bit easier to get to. So yeah, they're fairly similar plays to me. They're relatively low owned, and they probably should be.
All right, let's move on to game number 3 so that we could talk about my favorite stack of the day. Although it's bound to change because we do have one less awesome bat in this lineup. Astros and Rangers, 5-run implied total, 5.1 run implied total for the Astros, at least what I had, 3 for the Rangers. Framber Valdez and Cole Ragans. I don't know how to say his last name. Say it like this. Don't put him in your lineup. 53% ownership coming into Valdez today, 9,800 against this Rangers team. It's got some strikeouts at the bottom as well. This is the guy that I have the most exposure to from a pitching perspective. I like Valdez more than I like Cease. I like Valdez and Cease way more than I like anybody else on this slate. I will be jamming Framber Valdez into at least the mark of the field. I assume you like him. I'm curious what you think the relationship is with his ownership.
So I'm I guess I need to look at his ownership. That's really interesting to me that you like Framber Valdez better than Dylan Cease. Framber Valdez getting higher ownership. He only has a 21.7% strikeout rate so far this year, but the field likes him better too. What is it about Framber Valdez to you that makes you like him better than Dylan Cease? Just the matchup?
Matchup certainly helps. I think that the Rangers have more strikeouts in their lineup than the Royals do. I'd say that the Rangers lineup in general is probably worse than the Royals as well. And I have Valdez set to record 2 more outs than Cease. Okay. And just simply getting a little bit deeper in the game is the offset. I've got Valdez by 0.4 of a fantasy point. So nothing too crazy. And then obviously a $600 savings.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, my natural instinct was to go to Dylan Cease, just he has 10% lower, 11% lower ownership, 42.3% projected ownership, 34.2% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the slate. So Dylan Cease looks pretty good from that standpoint. Valdez is just so high owned at 53.2% projected ownership, 35.1% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the slate. I mean, I think with both Framber Valdez and Dylan Cease, you play him if you get him. If I have 10,400, I'm more likely to play Dylan Cease personally than Valdez. He just has the higher strikeout rate. Kansas City did get worse, trading away some of their better bats. So that kind of helps a little bit too with Dylan Cease. So I would be inclined to get to Dylan Cease before Framber Valdez if I have the salary. But yeah, I think Framber Valdez is the second best pitcher on this slate to me. So also going to get to plenty of Framber Valdez. Happy to play him in a solid matchup against Texas. He just the only thing that I don't love about Framber Valdez is that he's a better real life pitcher than a fantasy pitcher, just because he doesn't have a great strikeout rate. But it's serviceable, and there are strikeouts in the Rangers lineup. The Rangers have a 3-run implied total, so clearly Framber Valdez is expected to pitch well. So makes sense to me to get to a lot of Framber Valdez. He is one of the best pitchers on the slate, no matter how you cut it. I think I have a slight preference for Cease. Josh has a slight preference for Valdez. We're splitting hairs, so they're the top 2 pitchers on the slate.
On my first run, I had 59% Valdez and 46% Cease. They are the drivers for everything that I've got going today.
Okay.
Speaking of things I want to get a lot of, that would be the Astros bats. Although no Yordan Alvarez in the lineup will slightly change the equation, but they were 4th in our top stack, 5th in ownership. They were my number 2 overall stack and the team that I was most over the field on from a stacking perspective. That may come down a little bit, although, 2 guys in the lineup with MPEs helps. 2nd, 1st, outfield, 3rd in the top 4 spots makes it very easy to stack that lineup. I'm not all that worried about the salaries, only 2 guys north of 5K. I love the Astros. I hope they continue to maintain this relatively low ownership. To me, this is the easiest one on the slate.
Is it still I feel like it's been 3 years running now that the Astros are just always too low owned for how good they are. And I feel like it's because of the cheating scandal. People just never want to play the Astros, and it never makes sense to me because I know, me too, because I love playing the Astros, and they're just such an easy lineup to play. They have so many good players across the board at different positions that I always love playing the Astros. And the top stack still today makes a lot of sense to play them. 7.9% projected ownership, 9.7% chance of being the top stack on the board. They are the the way I usually pick a single entry lineup, if I ever played single entry, I look at the top stacks and I'm like, which of the teams has the highest top stack odds and also positive leverage? Houston is that team. They have the 9.7% top stack odds. They are the highest of the positive leverage teams in that metric. So I like Houston here. They're a great lineup, easy to play. Cole Reagans is not a pitcher who scares me. So yeah, I like Houston a lot here. So they're your favorite lineup on the entire board, you say?
Yeah, I had more Rockies just in the aggregate than I have the Astros, but one of those teams is twice as owned as the other. So I am going to be easily 2x the field on Houston. This is going to be my biggest stand of the day, and I'm very happy with it. Lineup's loaded other than not having Alvarez in it. You have guys like Trey Mancini at 3,700 with an MPE. Yeah, that'll work for me.
Yeah.
Diaz will work for me with a third outfield MPE. Yuli Gurriel in the 2-hole first baseman at 3,200. Like, does he have any power? No. Does that matter to me because he's hitting second? Also, no.
Yeah, right. Hitting second in a lineup that's got a 5-run implied total, but obviously they have potential to put up 12 runs. Like, it wouldn't shock anybody to see Houston put up 12 runs against Cole Reagans. So yeah, it makes sense to me.
I am not getting to the Rangers. However, they were second to last in top stack, dead last in ownership. I obviously have a lot of Valdez. Do you like getting to a team like the Rangers on a day like this where the opposing pitcher is in half of lineups?
I do. So this is the kind of spot that I usually like to attack. I think that if you're playing 20 lineups, that might be where I start to get like one share of the Rangers. I wouldn't go overboard with the Rangers in a matchup with Framber Valdez. People don't hit home runs. Teams don't hit home runs against Framber Valdez, and that's kind of what you need in fantasy. They look good though in terms of top stack odds: 1.6% projected ownership, 2.6% chance of being the top stack, 3.6% chance of being the top point per dollar stack. So from a top stacks perspective, I think Texas makes sense. If you are 150 max in, I would probably get to some Rangers. I don't even know if I'll get there in my first 20 lineups. It might be 50 before I get to a Rangers stack. They're not a great team in general. You usually don't want to go out of your way to play the Rangers, and certainly not against Framber Valdez. But from a 150 perspective, if you're playing 150, I think it makes sense to get over the field, just because it's baseball. Anything can happen, and nobody's playing them.
Anything else you want to touch on in this game?
Let's see, Cole Reagans. We want to play any Cole Reagans. He is the cheapest. So 1.8% projected ownership for Cole Reagans with a 24.3% chance of being top 2 value, 7.5% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. He's the cheapest, so theoretically he allows you to get to lineups that nobody else will. But I don't have a ton of interest in Cole Reagans. He's not somebody that I'm going to force into any of my lineups. Probably the only way I'll play Cole Reagans is if I have 5,500 or less left over. I'd probably play him over Dakota Hudson.
Okay.
It's close though.
Okay.
So yeah,
guys,
nothing else.
Okay. Odds Shopper, presenting sponsor of this show. It's the easiest thing that I ever have to talk about while I do these kind of reads, because it's very clearly the best thing that we're giving to you, and it costs you nothing at all. That's the selling point for me. If you're into sports betting, this is the perfect place to start. At the very least, you can shop around and make sure when you're putting in a bet that you're getting the best line that you possibly can. That is a completely selfish endeavor for you as well. It will help you. It doesn't help anybody else, and it definitely doesn't help the sportsbook. So do the thing that helps you the best by shopping around and taking the best line. Or if you're more interested in the player prop side of this one, you're in luck. We give you the projections. We give you the expected ROI. We give you the expected win rate. All of this information is right at your fingertips. And it's the same sort of principle as I just mentioned. You'll also find the best line and be one click away from that bet. It costs you nothing. This isn't part of a subscription package. This is just simply sign up for Odds Shopper. It costs you an email address. I think that's a pretty low ask. And you have all of this information and data at your fingertips. Even if you're not in a legal state, I think it would, one, help to just simply familiarize yourself with a tool that will inevitably work for you when this is legalized across the board. And two, I still think it has some benefits for DFS play. You want to look at sides and totals. You want to look at individual player props for some of your hitters. See if you can get an idea of like if you're in between two guys, comparing some of their player props might help point you in the right direction. Again, all of this is at oddshopper.com and all of it is free. So please just go check it out, guys. I promise you, worst case scenario, it is net neutral for you. And I don't even really see a case how it could be neutral for you. It is going to be positive for you and will cost you nothing.
Absolutely.
Game number 4. Number 4. We're not at the big one yet. We're knocking on the door of the big one, but we are on the big one from a pitching perspective. 3.4 run implied total for the Royals, 4.4 for the White Sox. Zach Greinke and Dylan Cease. Cease, 40-something% owned at this moment, the second highest owned guy on the slate, the most expensive pitcher on the slate at $10,400. I don't really have much to say. We've sort of talked about him already, but the key piece here is just he's really good. The Royals are average-ish, and I think Dylan Cease completely warrants all of the ownership that he's getting.
Yep. Same page, 32.8% strikeout rate this year. It was 31.9% last year. That's just who he is. He's a great strikeout pitcher in a great matchup against Kansas City. I think he is the best pitcher on the slate, bar none, and the best fantasy pitcher. So if you can get Dylan Cease into your lineup, play some Dylan Cease. Nothing else really needs to be said there. I think we need to talk about Zach Greinke a little bit more because it sounds like you're playing a lot of Zach Greinke. Is it the 13.1% strikeout rate that gets you there, or what is it that you love about Zach Greinke?
So a lot is relative. I believe that I just finished my updated crunch with some of these new lineups with Valdez out, or with Alvarez out. So I don't think that this is going to change anything. The problem for me with Greinke is probably twofold. I just don't even want to talk about him, honestly. So one, the price tag obviously just works. Like he's 5,700. There aren't a lot of pay down options. He does not project for a lot of strikeouts. Let's be clear here. Steamer has him at 16%. That might even be optimistic. But Steamer still projects him at a 4.32 FIP. So around league average. No walks either. I think there's a case where while he might not be getting strikeouts, he's like being really fortunate with hit luck on a day like today. This is a park that negates power, which I'm pretty happy to see. 92 park factor to righty power, 92 park factor to lefty power. And the more sort of interesting piece for me is the White Sox total in this game. It's not as if they're running up a gigantic run total. So he's getting some respect somewhere, evidently in the betting line, or we should just assume that the White Sox lineup isn't very good. I don't know which side of that coin we're really at, but for them to have what I had as a 4.4 run implied total, we can, quibble about where that actually lands. It's not high at all. And that is what's really curious to me. So on the previous run that I had 13% Greinke, and I think it's probably going to land somewhere there. So he's kind of like my pitching stand at the bottom. Please don't take that as me thinking Zach Greinke is good, but he is ending up in my lineups.
As far as I can tell, we still don't have a White Sox lineup, but their team total has gone down from 4.8 to start. It's down to 4.4 now. So yeah, something's up there. Their team total. Oh, we did just get it. We got it a couple minutes ago.
Okay.
Luis Robert, Andrew Vaughn, Eloy Jimenez, Abreu, Grandal, Moncada, Harrison, Sosa, and Zavala. Who are missing? I think we're missing one of the top. Oh, this is different than what I had seen when I was looking at it earlier.
I have no idea. I don't ever remember lineups. I just paste in a script and it just ends up there. So I have no idea what's ever in there and then not in there.
Okay. I don't know. I think they're missing somebody. But yeah, I mean, it's good team. Usually I like playing the White Sox when they are going under owned. Usually they're not a team that I like to target with pitchers, but yeah, I mean, there is something going on with Greinke, and he looks good in the top pitchers tool. 2.9% projected ownership with a 21.3% chance of being the top point per dollar pitcher, 7.5% chance of being the top two pitcher on the slate. He's only 5,700. The White Sox team total is going down. I guess those are the reasons to like the White Sox, even if he's not going to get more than 3 strikeouts. If he can go 5 or 6 innings, maybe pick up a win, that would probably be enough at 5,700. So I get it. I get playing some Zach Greinke, and I take it you like him better than anybody around him in terms of Garrett Hill or lower. I assume you like Plesac better if you could get up there.
In our last ownership run, we slightly bumped Greinke to 3.5% with Hill at 1%. I now have one additional lineup of Hill over Greinke, so 10% to 9%.
Okay. Interesting.
With a pretty aggressive fade of Zach Plesac now.
Huh. Okay. And you like Detroit, so you're playing Detroit, not playing Zach Plesac.
Let's
like is a strong word for Detroit. To be clear.
The Tigers are like this stuff is always moving. I don't have an actual stack, a 5 or 4 man of the Tigers, but they are aggressive filler for me.
Okay.
I think it's going to be a very weird slate. The only thing that I know for certain is that I'm going to play a shit ton of the Astros, and Dylan Cease and Framber Valdez are going to be in 100% of my lineups of the 200% that I get for pitchers. That I know for sure.
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay, from a bats perspective, people are not going to the Royals. They are 11th in ownership, 12th in top stack. Cease on the opposite side. I asked you this question about Valdez and getting to the Rangers. How do you feel about the Royals against Cease?
I'm guessing I'm not going to like the Royals. I'll take a look at the top stacks tool and see if they're low enough owned. No, I'm not playing. I'm not playing the Royals against Cease. 3.8% projected ownership with a 1.9% chance of being the top stack on the board. That surprises me. Usually with these teams playing against the best pitchers, they'll be under 1% ownership and then have like a 2% chance of being the top stack on the board. I'm wondering why people are playing Kansas City against Dylan Cease. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So yeah, it's a full fade for me. Not playing Kansas City.
I basically don't have them other than MJ Melendez. If you get a catcher / outfielder in the leadoff spot, like that's just going to be a good play for me in general, regardless of who's on the opposite side. But I'm not getting to full stacks or anything of Kansas City. And I'm not really getting to them of the White Sox either. They are 4th in our top stack tool, 6th in ownership. So a positive leverage team here against Greinke. I certainly see the appeal of wanting to be up against Zach Greinke and his lack of missing bats, but doesn't seem like I'm probably going to be relatively neutral to the White Sox. How are you seeing them?
Just based on the top stack tool, I like the White Sox. Positive leverage, and 8.1% chance of being the top stack and still having positive leverage. I naturally have some interest in the White Sox, even though their implied total keeps going down. It's down to 4.4. They're not one of the top teams on the slate in that perspective. So yeah, not my favorite team on the slate, but they are. They're, let's see, 5th in top stacks. I was going to say, I keep saying, like before I said Cleveland was one of my top 4 teams in terms, and now I'm just basically reading the top stacks when I say that. So it's not what I'm meaning to do, but it's like, I'm just looking through the teams. There's nobody below them that I think I would rather get to. So yeah, they're one of my top 5 favorite stacks on the slate. They're also 5th in top stack odds. So it's not saying much.
Let's move it on to the game that we need to talk most about. That is Coors, Colorado Rockies and St. Louis Cardinals, basically at like 6 runs apiece in this one. Massive total. German Marquez going for the Rockies, Dakota Hudson going for the Cardinals. I do not have any Dakota Hudson. I do have 12% German Marquez. I tend to do that. I end up getting pitchers in Coors pretty regularly. I think they get under-owned just sort of in general. I don't really want to get to too much Marquez, particularly against this Cardinals team that doesn't strike out, but it is happening because of his lack of ownership. Do you have any interest in Marquez or Hudson? I assume Marquez over Hudson because Hudson sucks.
Yeah, zero interest in Hudson. Marquez, if I were going to play one of them, it would be Marquez, but I don't have a ton of interest in Marquez. He doesn't even look great in the top pitchers tool. 1% projected ownership, 7.5% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, and 8% chance of being a top 2 value pitcher. So I shouldn't say that if that were a stack, I would be like, hell yeah, you need to play that stack. So he does look good in the top pitchers tool, but in terms of like value pitchers, it doesn't stand out to me as like a must play. I get it though. I get why you'd want to play German Marquez. It's just such a tough spot in Coors today. It's hot from what I have read. I think the winds are blowing out. It's just a really tough day to pitch in Coors, but he has experience pitching in Coors, if that counts for anything.
Yeah.
The Cardinals have a 6.5 run implied total, but I don't know. We've seen crazier things than German Marquez, who is, a decent major league pitcher. He's had years in the past where he's been great. We've seen crazier things than German Marquez pitching well in Coors, even against the Cardinals. So I get it. I get why you'd want to get there, but certainly not somebody I'm forcing in.
The Cardinals are our number one stack today. No surprise. Number one in aggregate ownership. No surprise. The Rockies are second in both of those things. No surprise. I am fading the Cardinals. I am jamming the Rockies. Talk to me about what you think you'll be doing here with the bats in this one.
Yeah, so we finally have negative leverage on St. Louis. Coming in, the first time I looked at top stacks today, it was showing the ownership, I think, lower than this, and the top stack odds higher. So they were looking like by far the best team on the slate. And I didn't think that would stick around because, 27% projected ownership is just so high, even on a 6-game slate for any team to be 27%. But they look fairly neutral in the top stacks tool still. I say negative leverage, but it's 27% projected ownership, 26.1% chance of being the top stack on the board. So St. Louis is still fairly neutral, but I just feel like you would be competing with so much of the field that it's hard for me to really want to play a ton of the Cardinals. I would expect to be underweight to the Cardinals. And they have a tougher matchup against German. They're obviously the better team, the better lineup against German Marquez, but tougher matchup. So I think of the two of them, I would be more inclined to get to Colorado, coming in at 11% less projected ownership, 16% projected ownership, 17.8% chance of being the top stack on the board. So they have some positive leverage. So yeah, if I'm playing one of them, I'm more inclined to play Colorado, but I think I'm even more inclined to just go to a non-Coors game. I think the Coors games have just been crushing so much recently that I think that the ownership, I don't see the ownership coming in a lot lower than what we have projected. I'd be more surprised if it was lower than if it was higher. I would be expect it to be higher, if anything, is what I'm trying to say. So I'm more inclined to go to non-Coors games, but I'll have them, or as my primary stack, I'm more inclined to go to non-Coors games. I'll still have plenty of batters from this game as one-offs.
I'm expecting Colorado to be my most exposed team. I'm well above the ownership numbers at this moment. I'm well below on the Cardinals, but I am still getting to St. Louis. They are my third most exposed team in the aggregate. It's my biggest fade for sure. And I'm not getting them really at all as a 5-man stack or as a 4-man stack, but loading up on them in 3-mans, 2-mans, single one-off type stacks. But Rockies and Astros, those are the two teams that I need to pop off today. If they do, it will be a print fest for Josh Engelman.
No CJ Cron today, I'm seeing in chat.
Yeah, that will matter. From a cash perspective, it's going to be probably 7 or 8 guys from this game, primarily Cardinals to start, Rockies certainly as some filler, but this is definitely the spot where we're getting pretty much all of the cash game options. I do want to
some super. Oh, you're
yeah. I was just circling back to them now. Yeah. I wanted to circle back to DFIC. He said exposure caps on pitchers or just who fits stacks. I don't set exposure caps for anybody. Do you set caps for pitchers?
Yeah, so I typically do set caps for pitchers. And batters actually. I set exposure caps for both individually and like stacks. So I think today, looking at the pitchers on this slate, let me take a look at this. If I were 150 max, so I'm more inclined to set caps when I'm 150 maxing. I'm less likely to set exposure caps if I'm only playing like 10 to 20 lineups. Sure. So if I were 150 maxing today, I think I would probably set my cap at around 50%. And that's different than the way I played last year, and I had more success last year, so maybe I shouldn't have changed this, but the way I played last year, I probably would have set it right around 40%, which would put me naturally under the field on both Dylan Cease and Framber Valdez and higher on all the other pitchers on the board. But I think the way I have evolved, the way I'm playing this year is I'm setting it a little bit higher and letting Fantasy Cruncher give me higher projected lineups. So it'd probably be 50% for me if I'm 150 maxing today, which I'm not sure if I am.
And Phil still asked single entry best main and filler stacks, Cardinals and Rockies. I mean, that's right out of the gate where you would want to be. They are going to
concerns
be
about they're going to be even higher owned, right? Rockies and Cardinals. Like, isn't that kind of how it usually goes?
Cardinals for sure. Yeah, Cardinals for sure.
Cardinals.
I assume Rockies as well. As I mentioned, I like the Astros quite a bit, but there's very easy ways to get different, even if you have a Cardinals stack, whether that's, not having Cease and Valdez, going to an Edward Cabrera, a non 45% owned guy, change up one of those top pitchers, change your one-offs on the opposite side to go relatively low owned there. But I don't approach single entry really any different than I would approach anything else. The best stacks are still the best stacks. It's sort of just what you're doing with the rest of your lineup.
I think that so for me, single entry, which I don't play a ton of single entry, so I'm no single entry expert. I'm not going to claim to be, but I think that my inclination is usually to go away from the highest projected ownership, because I think typically ownership condenses even more around the highest projected owned team. So it would be not St. Louis, but I think Colorado you could still play just fine. It would be for me one of Colorado, Houston, Cleveland, or the White Sox would be my single entry team. I'd say take your pick of those 4 teams.
Perfect. One last thing to tell you guys about. And by the way, when I asked for 80 likes, you guys got me up to 127 now, 600 people in it. If we could hit 150, I think that would be great. 150 likes for the 150 max contests. I think that seems like a really nice relationship. NFL preseason is here. We've got NFL preseason projections. The deal that we had before is gone. I told you guys you should have taken advantage of it, but now we've got a different one for you. Use the promo code TUA, TUA. You can get our preseason DFS projections for $5. So go ahead and grab them now. Click the link in the description of this video and then use that promo code TUA, TUA, to get our preseason DFS projections for the NFL for just $5. And now we close it out. Diamondbacks and Pirates. Merrill Kelly going for the Diamondbacks. JT Brubaker going for the Pirates. Brubaker 7% owned. Merrill Kelly, basically the second and third most owned guy. He and Kyle Gibson are essentially tied at 30%. Merrill Kelly 9,100. Good matchup in that the Pirates stink. Not exactly a ton of strikeouts in their lineup, however. I am quite a bit under the field on Merrill Kelly. I'm under on Gibson as well. I'm not getting to those guys at 30%. I'm basically taking half of each one of their ownerships and scattering it about a bunch of other garbage at the bottom. What are you doing with Merrill Kelly?
I'm letting Fantasy Cruncher give me whatever it gives me, essentially. I mean, he's 30% projected ownership, 26.6% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the board. Slight negative leverage there. He's not a great strikeout pitcher. He has 20% strikeout rate. Let me pull that up. 20.6% strikeout rate this year, 19.5% last year. Not the best strikeout pitcher in the world, so not a ton of interest from that perspective. He has a 3.13 expected ERA so far this year, so he's a good not great pitcher in a solid matchup. As you said, not a ton of strikeouts in the Pirates lineup either, so you're kind of hoping that Merrill Kelly gets through 6-7 innings and gets the win is kind of what you need to happen here, which is it's plausible against Pittsburgh. Seems maybe even almost likely. So yeah, Merrill Kelly, a fine pitcher. I'll get what Fantasy Cruncher gives me. I'm a lot more inclined to go to Zach Plesac at the top and Framber Valdez if I can afford them. If I can't, I'm totally fine playing Merrill Kelly at 9,100. JT Brubaker actually looks better in the top pitchers tool than Merrill Kelly does, coming in at 6.8% projected ownership with a 17.2% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 17.5% chance of being a top 2 value pitcher. Are you playing any Brubaker against Arizona?
I have 5%, so basically no different than the field. He's showing up in the bottom of a couple lineups, nothing too crazy.
Okay. Yeah, I'm probably not going to go out of my way to get to JT Brubaker. I have a history of playing plenty of JT Brubaker. 22.6% strikeout rate this year is 24% last year, so he's a decent strikeout pitcher. It actually surprised me. He's better than Merrill Kelly. That's not what I would have guessed. 4.37 expected ERA. The numbers are fine. Fine matchup against Arizona. So yeah, I'm happy to play some JT Brubaker at 7,800. Happy to play either of these guys. They're not my favorite pitchers on the board, but I'll take what Fantasy Cruncher gives me, and I'll be happy with it.
Diamondbacks are 4th in aggregate ownership, 6th in our top stack tool. This is a team that I have not been getting to pretty regularly as of late. They've been pulling ownership and I have not been there. And today doesn't appear to be a different day. I am very light on Arizona and compared to their ownership. Doesn't seem like I'm going there. Probably a little bit heavier on the Pirates than I want to be, but we're talking about like 3% in the aggregate. So nothing too crazy. This is mostly a game that I won't have a part of.
Yeah, neither of these teams really stand out to me as teams that I really want to force into my lineups. 3.5 run implied total for the Pirates. 4.7 for the Diamondbacks is not bad. It's pretty middling. So might have some interest in the Diamondbacks, but they are getting 8.6% projected ownership. So if they're going to get 8.6% projected ownership, I would rather be under the field and have more of those 5 teams I mentioned earlier that I like: the Cardinals, Rockies, Guardians, White Sox, and Astros. I'd rather get to all of them. There are probably some lower owned teams that I'd rather get to too. So I don't see myself getting to a ton of Arizona here. It's a mediocre matchup, mediocre team, too high of ownership. Simple as that. I'm not going to play them.
All righty. Well, let's sum it all up because we're going to kick this one over to MLB Live before lock in a second. By the way, thank you guys for getting up to that 150 like mark. So who are your favorite stacks for today?
Favorite stacks. All right. If I had to rank them, it would probably be Colorado, Cleveland, Houston, White Sox. Top 4. Who are your favorite stacks for the day?
Rockies and Astros for me are driving everything. I will highly, highly recommend the Astros just in relationship to their ownership. I think they are the team that everybody is missing, given the amount of ownership that's going to Colorado and St. Louis. Colorado and St. Louis, 45% of the hitter exposure for today. I just want to get to Houston because that is a level of talent that is just underrepresented, in my opinion.
Josh, before we get off the show, I want you to commit to something.
Okay.
It was brought up in chat. If you cannot find somebody to do the lip tattoo within 6 months, will you get a tramp stamp instead?
No. I don't have a tattoo. So I am not looking to put a tattoo that I don't want on my body in a very relatively visible place. I will get that lip tattoo. I will get that lip tattoo done.
All right, you'll do it yourself.
No doubt about it.
Nobody else will do it.
No doubt about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I can find somebody in Wilmington to do it for sure. I'm not surprised that we couldn't hunt down somebody in Chicago, but like certainly I know a friend of a friend that will just like be happy to do it.
I would have thought for sure you'd find somebody in Chicago. All right.
So would I. Favorite pitchers, and then we're out of here. Obviously, Cease and Valdez are at the top of the list.
Yep. It's Cease number 1 for me, then Valdez. I have some interest in Edward Cabrera just because he's an unknown, and I'm a sucker for unknowns, and he looks great in the top pitchers tool. 22% chance of being a top 2 pitcher on the board at only 9.2% projected ownership. So I'd say those are the 3 for me that I have the most interest in.
All righty. Well, that will do it. Deeper dive in the books. Don't go anywhere. Stay on this stream. MLB Live Before Lock coming up next, taking you all the way up till 1 whatever time lock is, 5:10. You guys know the drill. Good luck, everybody. Talk to you later.
Welcome into a Thursday, Field of Dreams Thursday here. Don't worry, we're not going to touch that game. Let me double check. No, we're not going to touch that game. Thank goodness. All right, enough. But here, we appreciate you hanging with us. So make sure you hit the thumbs up button and you're subscribed, of course, to the Odd Shopper channel. It's not just me that I know you love to hate with the comments section. I love it, by the way. Good, bad. We get so many different, wide range, if you will, of reaction. And we appreciate and welcome it all. Seriously, as long as you're not offensive, that's fine. You can even be offensive to me. I don't care. But YouTube may. We just don't want any of that. Other than that, have at it, right? We had a 1-2 night last night. Wasn't great. We're going to bounce back tonight. We're going to sweep the board tonight. Have a good feeling about it. It's Thursday. We have some early action, so you want to get in now. And speaking of which, let's jump to BetMGM. By the way, I still have that risk-free opportunity here for you at BetMGM up to $1,000. So I don't know what you're waiting on. We're going to move here in chronological order more so than anything else. All right, so let's start with the Marlins-Phillies game. And look, this pitching matchup here is one to target for 2 different reasons, right? Edward Cabrera and then Kyle Gibson. Let's get the Phillies out of the way here. Big win. I get it. They're exhausted. The weather, by the way, not as hot as we've seen it. Humidity, but also a lot of rain last night. So I think the early start combined with the weather is actually going to help both of these two pitchers. And on the other side, it's Edward Cabrera. So the play here is going to be no run first inning at -130. That's what we're going to start off with. And again, there's no real exhale for the Phillies after that game last night against Alcantara. Now they've got Cabrera. The K rate's over 27%. Hard throwing. This is a guy who can get to a couple of righties in this lineup here, and taking advantage again of the weather and just that type of victory, draining victory from the Phillies last night. This is where I want to target the no. Now, as far as Gibson is concerned, you're not going to get a ton of strikeouts. That's fine. That's not something that we are targeting all the time when it just means get out of the first inning. A good pitch to contact arm. So he's been able to maintain that. The numbers are there. And the beauty of going to Gibson here in a no-run first inning, along with Edward Cabrera, who should probably strike 2 of 3 guys out, is the Marlins just don't score on the road. 0.25 runs per first inning on the road. That's second worst in all of baseball. So this is kind of the thought process here, right? I know we have some comment. How can we never go 3-0? We do. We also go 0-3 at times. It's happened, I think, twice, maybe 3 times max since we started this video. So it does happen. An ugly night can happen every now and again. This is a ridiculous market with tons of variance that we're betting into, but I love it. With that said, Gibson's facing a Marlins team that just doesn't score early. That's it. They just don't. And that's going to help him in any capacity, especially if he's pitching to contact. All right, take advantage of a risk-free bet. It's $1,000 and it's here for you. Seriously. I don't know how many times we can tell you, like if you're watching this right now and it's Thursday, you've heard me at least, because we do this 7 days a week, you've heard me at least for a week, if not more, right? Tell you that I've got a risk-free bet at BetMGM, that I've got a risk-free bet at BetMGM, a risk-free bet up to $1,000 at BetMGM. And it's so simple. You can click the link below, or you can use our promo code OSNRFI. And all you need to do is deposit up to $1,000. Easiest thing is take your bankroll. Whatever your bankroll is for the NFL, college football, basketball, it's right around the corner. Let's say your bankroll is $500 for one of these sports. You're waiting all year to bet on the NFL, right? You have $500 set aside. Take that, deposit it into the BetMGM account, bet it on Raza's sharp play of the day, Greg Ehrenberg, Josh Engel, whoever it may be. Eric Lindquist has like 50 different things coming on here. So, you know, between that, the WNBA, UFC, NASCAR, stop. PGA, stop. We have so much that you can bet on. Just take advantage of the risk-free opportunity. My goodness, it's there for you. I've already used this. So is everybody else on this channel. I can tell you that. We get it like you get it, and we want to take advantage of it. All right, next game up for us is Cardinals Rockies, and this is going to go exactly how you think. 165. The written piece had this at 160. That's where I would stop. 165, I'm okay here. This hasn't changed, by the way. It's just the 60 to 65. And let's be honest, we're talking about really the pitchers here. Herman Marquez for Colorado, Dakota Hudson for St. Louis. It's as bad as it sounds, folks. It's also Coors Field. It's also the Cardinals, who just put up 5 runs in the first inning last night. Yeah, this is a terrible combination for the pitchers and for any NRFI. And to be honest with you, I'm not 130. It's not even so much about laying the 165. It's the risk of only getting a 130 return here. And you can look at the hold, granted, at 165, 130, really 160, 130. And that can speak volumes.
Can't hear anything. Can't hear anything, Tyler. Yeah. What's going on, everybody? I don't know if you guys were able to hear the music. I could tell you I certainly couldn't. Terry, were you able to hear any of that music at all or no?
Nope, didn't hear a thing until you're interested.
Well, who knows? Maybe you guys heard music. Maybe it was just an awkward silence for you guys as well. But we've got a baseball show to talk about next 54 minutes here. Terry and I are going to be breaking down today's afternoon slate. Kind of an odd Thursday slate because we don't really have night games. There's no night slate. There's 2 games. So focusing most of our content here on the earlier slate. So like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. 6 games to break down. One of them includes a Coors Field game. So that is going to be something that is obviously going to impact a lot of the ownership here. We currently have nearly 50% of the field stacking the Coors Field game. We'll be talking about some of the merits of stacking that game or going elsewhere. But Terry, how you like today's 6-game slate and how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, bud. It was a pleasant surprise just a few minutes ago to find out that I was on this show. I guess I hadn't checked the schedule thoroughly enough, or it was updated since the last time I looked at it, but glad to be here. Definitely always fun to jump on and talk baseball with you. It looks like an interesting enough slate. The Coors Field game, when I was putting things together a few minutes ago, just getting my model together and getting ready here, I was kind of disappointed to see that the Coors game was a part of this slate. I was hoping to get away from Coors since it was in the afternoon here, but one more to go, and it will have to deal with it. Obviously, big run totals on either side over there and a ton of ownership going to it, but interesting enough slate, kind of thin on pitching. So we'll see where we land.
Did you play last night's slate, by the way?
I did play last night. Yeah.
I've never remembered a more mediocre pitching slate in terms of it didn't matter what you did at pitcher. Every pitcher was just whatever. So using DraftKings points as a reference, it was 17 fantasy points for Alcantara, 17 for Verlander, which was whatever. If you had them, cool. If you didn't, also okay. And then all of the cheap pitchers that were chalk scored 10 to 12 fantasy points, every single one of them. So it really didn't matter who you picked at pitcher. And then you just if you played the chalk at offense a bunch, which I didn't do as much as I should have in hindsight, although not really. I don't generally love to play the chalk all that often, but you kind of made out okay on this. I know Eric last night won the $4 on DK, so that was pretty cool. I woke up to some text from him about that, but yeah, that aside, we've got more Coors Field to talk about and pitching, which could be more mediocre today than last night, at least because at the top, we've got Dylan Cease to talk about, and Dylan Cease, the guy doesn't give up runs anymore for the most part. I know in his last start, he gave up, a couple of runs? It was the most he'd given up in a very, very long time. And it was, oh, no, never mind. He ended up giving up 1 earned run. I thought it was 2 for some reason. But anyway, the last time, actually, I think the last Cease start, you and I also did a show together, Terry. But the last time that Dylan Cease gave up multiple runs in a start was May 24th against the Boston Red Sox. It has been a very long time since Dylan Cease did not have a good outing. So considering the pitching outlook on this slate, we've got Dylan Cease projected for 45% ownership on DK, over on FanDuel. 24% ownership feels a little bit low to me. But do you think the chalk on Dylan Cease is warranted?
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly on talent. I think we can call him the best pitcher on the board, especially for DFS purposes. You can make the argument that Framber's right there with him in terms of the overall talent, but for DFS, we're looking for that strikeout upside. And he's the guy who's going to provide it on this slate. Decent matchup going up against the Marlins. It is a high price. Oh, I'd have to grab the DK pricing. I only have FanDuel loaded up here. It is a high price, and there's certainly some ownership there, but I could definitely see him, 6-game slate with this pitching slate. He should probably be a little bit more popular. So definitely like that spot. Highest strikeout rate available. Nothing not to like about the matchup here against the Royals. Plenty of strikeouts in that lineup now. They had formerly been one of those teams that was kind of, decent at avoiding strikeouts, but this year there's plenty of, 20 plus strikeouts in this lineup. 26% for MJ up top, 28 for Sal, as deadly a bat as he can be. Nick Pratto sitting at 34% over his 67 plate appearances so far. So definitely plenty of strikeout on the table for Cease here. I like the spot.
Yeah, and also in terms of this matchup that he has against the Royals, just watered down lineup. No more Andrew Benintendi, no more Whit Merrifield. They were both shipped off the trade deadline. Maybe a little bit surprised that Salvador Perez is still hanging around, but I mean, that aside, this is a really good matchup for Cease. I think what a lot of people are going to be making decision point of, particularly on FanDuel, is whether they want to pay up for Dylan Cease or Framber Valdez. Based on the ownership on both FanDuel and DraftKings, if I have to pick one, it's going to be Cease for me. Cease is $500 more than Valdez over on FanDuel, but he's projected for about 10% less ownership. That feels like a pretty big gap to me. And then over on DK, Valdez is a little bit more popular, but 47% to 45%, things are more or less the same. I think Cease is a better pitcher than Valdez. I like the strikeout upside he brings to the table. So if I'm picking between the two, it's Cease for me. Do you have a preference between the two, Terry? And what do you make of Framber Valdez?
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. Leaning into the Cease side of things, I like the matchup a little bit better. I like the strikeout upside a lot better. So I think I would make that same decision and go to Cease if I'm going heads up. I do like Valdez. I think he's a very good pitcher. I think it's a good spot going up against the Rangers there for the lefty. 21.7% strikeout rate for Valdez this season. 3.21 xFIP. Keeps the ball down, as we know. Very, very difficult to hit it in the air, even let alone hit a home run against him. 1.27% home run rate on the season and negative 3.9 degree average launch angle. So Framber's very, very talented, has a very good shot at keeping this lineup down. It's just the potential dip in strikeouts from what Cease might deliver in a ceiling game to what Framber's likely to do. So yeah, I would have them 1-2, and I would have Cease on top of that.
Yeah, and I have to point out the Cease stat. I bring it up every single time that he pitches. I brought it up the last time Terry and I did a show also when Cease was pitching. Just because I mentioned that he hasn't given him more than one earned run in a start in 2 months now or whatever, or actually 2.5 months. We're going on nearly 3 months since Cease has had a start where he's given up more than one run. A couple of things. Number one, I bring this up every start. It is no impact on, there's no jinx, there's no curse, right? Eventually he's going to give up more than one earned run in a start. It's totally unrelated to whether I bring up this stat on a show or not.
Yeah, I think we can safely say that your impact over whether or not he's going to give up a run is not all that extreme. So I'm safe and I'm confident with all the things we're saying here.
Yeah, and he's a good play relative to the outlook on the slate. It's hard for me to get away from him, but there are some other pitchers to consider. And I mean, for Framber Valdez too, I don't love playing Framber Valdez in general, particularly not when he's chalk and he's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
His strikeout rate has come up over the course of the season, so that kind of makes him better. But in terms of the ownership, I might be a little bit underweight to it, but it's hard to get away from him entirely just because the other pitching options on the slate are just pretty mediocre. And then you get to the next tier of pitching. It's guys like Merrill Kelly, who, by the way, is also crazy popular today. Edward Cabrera, not all that popular, but he's expensive. He's in a tough matchup. He's not particularly good either. Yeah. So when you look at guys like Merrill Kelly, for instance, he is on DK projected for 30% ownership, over on FanDuel projected for 12%. Do you see him being a viable pivot off of the likes of Framber Valdez and Dylan Cease, or is there just not quite enough upside in Merrill Kelly?
No, I think it's definitely a viable pivot. He actually projects out pretty strongly for me. He's right there with Cease and Valdez in my projections. Not sure exactly where we have him on the site. I haven't gotten around to getting everything loaded up from there yet. So I'll talk ownership. We'll talk about the site rankings in a minute when we can get to them. But just on what I'm seeing in my model, and then just by virtue of the matchup, the Pirates are a team I've been targeting all year long with pitching. It's worked out fairly well. Every now and then you get dinged by doing it. But we've seen time and again, secondary and third tier type pitchers like a Merrill Kelly go out there and have a big game against this team. 20.6% strikeout rate, 3.94 xFIP. It's not great. It's, league average slightly below, but it's enough, I think, against this team. And he's another guy who he doesn't tend to give up a lot of hard contact, doesn't tend to give up a lot of home runs. 1.51% home run rate over 132 and a third innings is obviously very good. Only 35.4% hard hit. So a lot of good reasons to believe in Merrill Kelly here. Not the most trustworthy pitcher on the slate, maybe, but it's a great matchup, and he would probably be my number 3 overall on the board.
Yeah, and I don't think that's unreasonable. Now, with that said, I think he's a better play on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings, just because you are getting an actual ownership discount on him on FanDuel. 10-1, he's only 11% owned. We've got a lot of people gravitating towards Framber Valdez, Dylan Cease, which totally makes sense. DraftKings, there were people off the roster 2 pitchers. 30% Merrill Kelly feels a little bit steep to me. Does it not for you?
It does. But I mean, playing with the DK room, that would be pushing the edges of where I would want him. I'd probably look to be under, but that's tend to just be how I play slates anyway. So when I say that, I'm just trying to think of like, where am I trying to spread those shares? And with the amount of available pitching ownership, if you're building 150 lineups, like, do I really want to start pulling shares out of Merrill Kelly against the Pirates to give to, I guess, Kyle Gibson? Sure. But Brubaker on the other side of this one, not so much. I prefer the matchup for the Kelly side of it. Then we're talking like Zach Greinke, Zach Plesac. The 2 Zachs don't do a ton for me. Don't like the pitching in course today. So there's really not a lot of spots to spread a ton of ownership around. So like, if you're taking, 5-10% off of it, you can, but I don't know who I'm going out of my way to put that into, I guess. Where am I reinvesting those ownership shares?
Yeah, so we'll try to figure out some contrarian pitchers we like. But first, let's talk about Kyle Gibson, because he's the only other guy who's picking up ownership on this slate. A little bit cheaper from the top end guys. 9K on FanDuel, projected for 14% ownership over on DK. 8K, Gibson projected for north of 30% ownership. So this is a guy who exists in his own price tier. There isn't really anybody priced around him on DraftKings. I guess JT Brubaker does, but other than that, kind of on an island by himself. And same goes for FanDuel as well at 900. There's no 9,000. There's nobody else really priced around that 9K mark. He's got a decent enough matchup against the Miami Marlins. They're also, not quite as good of an offense they were earlier in the season. A lot of that has to do with two points. Number one, regression, but then two, Jazz Chisholm being hurt and being out for an extended period of time now. But Kyle Gibson, as somebody to pay down with, another pitcher who generally doesn't have that much strikeout upside, but tends to be a fairly safe option, do you view yourself getting over underweight to the field on him relative to his ownership?
What is his ownership at right now? I'm just getting to it. So
he's 14 on FanDuel, and then he's a little over 30 on DK.
DK, I would probably be in that general range, just given, price and how things would fall. That might be a little bit more, but 25, 30 feels about right. On the FanDuel side, I'd probably be a little bit below that. Like when my lineups come together, I would expect to be more around 10%. Just he's not the kind of guy I tend to get out to the 15% range. But that said, kind of like what I was just saying a minute ago about the other side of this, I don't know where I'm sending those shares. If I'm taking away from Gibson, like Gibson's kind of the bottom guy that I want to get to, that I find appealing out of these guys. And then I just really don't need to get to any Cole Ragans. I don't really need to get to any of either of the Zachs. I'm not, not that worried about it. So I'll have plenty. Maybe 15% does end up being right.
Yeah, and relative to the DK ownership, I'm underweight right now. Also, we're still waiting on that Cardinals lineup. I'm kind of interested to see what happens there, because it's afternoon game after night game last night. My gut feeling is that we're not going to see Yadi Molina in the lineup. This is just kind of a classic rest spot for a veteran player. I wouldn't be surprised to see like Paul Goldschmidt or maybe Albert Pujols potentially sit out this game as well, just because of the same reasons. Day game after a night game. But as we're just going through this slate, just kind of something that's going through my mind. If we don't have this Cardinals lineup prior to lock, do you think it's going to impact their ownership at all?
Maybe slightly, but I mean, I don't know that it'll be something where we'll be, eye-poppingly lower. Like you're not going to see Tyler O'Neill, who's projected for nearly 30% on FanDuel. I don't think he's going to come in at like half that because we don't have the lineup. I think it'll be, maybe there'll be a little imperceptible type of a dip where people lose confidence in it, but with time to swap those plays out and all of that, I think we'll probably end up near or thereabouts to the projections. Oh, the cat's here. I forgot. I didn't get a chance to lock the cat up either before the show. There he is, everybody.
A little lower. We would have gotten to see his asshole on stream. That would have been nice. So yeah, that's I had a cat when I was a kid growing up. For whatever reason, it seems like they're always showing their assholes off. But
yeah, they really like to.
Yeah,
the words prominent butthole get thrown around quite a bit around here.
Yeah, the old exclamation mark. So the Cardinals. Here's one thing I do have my eye on, though, and I know I'm kind of getting ahead of myself with offenses here, but we're missing two lineups right now for the slate. We don't have the Pirates. That's not going to matter all that much. And we don't have the Cardinals right now. But let's say we have a couple of guys end up in the lineup that aren't projected to be in right now, whether it's Andrew Kanizer or Brendan Donovan, Corey Dickerson. I do think those guys could be good ways to differentiate those Cardinal stacks, because if that lineup comes out after lock, I'm not sure people are going to get off Cardinal stacks as a whole. I'm actually pretty positive that's not going to be the case, but I'm not sure people are going to update their lineups to include some of these guys at the back end of the order in their stacks. And that's where I think we can maybe differentiate some of these lineups.
I love doing stuff like that. When there are lineups for good teams that come out late, like the Yankees the other day, when they dropped in, might even have been yesterday when Rizzo dropped back into the lineup, but the lineup came out after lock. I made sure that I was going in and making a bunch of different swaps that got Rizzo into a bunch of different Yankee stacks. Didn't really work out, but it was the move that you're talking about. So yeah, if you get an oddball Cards lineup, I think that makes a ton of sense. Grab some of the lower on bats. It's a great way to differentiate some of the super chalky stacks.
Yeah, and once again, we'll see what happens. The lineup will come out now, like in 5 minutes from now, and it'll all be irrelevant as a talking point anyway. But 6-game slate, making sure I leave no stone uncovered here. But Let's walk through some of the rest of the pitching. And one guy who's a little more relevant to the DraftKings slate than he is to the FanDuel slate, that is Zach Plesac, who is projected for 8% ownership on FanDuel. He's priced at 8,200. Good matchup for him against the Detroit Tigers. If you get to him, I think cool. If not, also, I don't think he's necessary by any means. But on DK, where a lot of people are looking to spend up at offense, we got the popular Coors Field game. Plesac is only $6,900 on DK. We also have to roster multiple starting pitchers. I'm not a big fan of Plesac. I don't think he's particularly good, but you know who's even worse than Plesac? The Detroit Tigers offense against right-hand pitching. So what do you make of him at $6,900 as a pitcher who's not particularly good, but at the same time also, there's going to be people that need salary savings somewhere, and there just aren't that many viable, cheap starting pitchers. Is he somebody that you think is worth getting to as a chalk SP2 on DK?
Yeah, I think, largely driven by the matchup. It's certainly not because of his 17.6% strikeout rate over 108 and a third. It's not because of his 4.41 xFIP. It's because this is a very bad offense against right-handed pitching. And even a guy like Plesac could find a couple bonus strikeouts here. So definitely at 6,900, that's just a very good, very low price. And I think 18% ownership, 20% ownership, that's probably about right. I think that's pretty comfy. That's not too overweight by the field. And it's just a great spot to just grab that salary, run with it, hope that he gives you one of those good enough games, and then none of the other SP2s go completely bonkers. And I think we're there. So yeah, I think that's a good SP2 spot. 8,200 on the FanDuel slate, I would probably leave it alone. I played a few shares of what's his face, the starter last night in this spot, and it didn't really work out. Kind of looked like it was going to for the beginning, but I don't know that I would go to for Plesac for 8,200. That feels a little thin.
Yeah, and it's really just matchup based. Like, I don't really want all that much to do with matchup based. Yeah, I don't want that much to do with Plesac on most slates, but we've got this garbage, really, really garbage Detroit Tigers offense. Plesac this year, 4.49 ERA, 5.45 expected ERA, 17.6% K rate. Nothing there looks enticing other than cheap price point on DK and that matchup against the Tigers. But now let's try to find some contrarian pitchers we like, because everybody that's chalk, I generally think is chalk for a reason, right? DK, Dylan Cease, Framber Valdez, Merrill Kelly, all good pitchers in good spots. Kyle Gibson, he's cheap. Zach Plesac's cheap in a good matchup. So I understand why people are getting to these pitchers. And over on the FanDuel slate, where people are just generally rostering Valdez, Cease, Merrill Kelly, Kyle Gibson, like that all makes sense to me. Is there anybody off the board that you think the field is missing out on, though, Terry?
I think the one that I would want to throw out there is probably JT Brubaker. I think he's got the upside. He's got a decent matchup against Arizona. I don't think very much of that Arizona lineup. I think there's some strikeouts there. He's positively leveraged to a pretty strong degree on that DK slate for 7,800, sitting at just 10% ownership. He's our 5th ranked starter on the DK slate by probability of success. It's not a lot of daylight between him and Zach Plesac, not a lot of daylight between him and Kyle Gibson, but he sits above both of those guys in terms of our board here, and he's drawing half the ownership of both of them. So I think that makes a little sense. I think the field is probably overlooking some JT Brubaker. There's a ton of warts on the play. It's not something that you're going to be comfy with, but if we're shopping around for a low owned play on a 6-game slate, I think that's our man. And it's probably more comfortable in saying like Armand Marquez against one of the best teams in baseball at Coors Field. So I think JT Brubaker is the guy, as bad as that might seem.
Yeah, there's a part of me that really wants to play German Marquez. I tried when I was building lineups before this, where I was giving him the old thumbs up in Fantasy Cruncher, running some lineups just because figure, look, he's 1% owned. The pitching today is fairly miserable. There's clear leverage to be had, and it just didn't matter what I did. He just didn't pop up in my lineup. So I tried to make it happen, and Fantasy Cruncher was like, "We're trying to save you here. Don't do it, right? Don't play him. We're not going to let you." So he just wouldn't appear in any of my lineup. So it looks like
I'm trying to get better at listening to the model, listening to the sort when it tries to tell me those things, and it says, "Hey, dummy, no, let's not do that today." There's a reason he's projecting for 12 FanDuel points in your model. That's not a good score. So yeah, I'm probably going to leave that one on the table too.
Got a super chat here from our guy, Jorge Giacomi. He's saying he's still inclined to play Plesac and no Detroit. The fact that he's a bad pitcher, and the last matchup against Detroit, he did really bad. I generally don't really care what pitchers did in the last matchup against an individual team. Everything is Plesac sucks though. Like there is very, very little doubt about that. His last start against Detroit, I mean, he gave up 2 earned runs. It's not like it was a total train wreck.
And that's the point. Like
but-
we're talking about Plesac here, a guy that we know is kind of bad. You can cherry pick it and just pick any random game from his game log. It was probably a pretty bad game, right? I mean, we're not talking about a good pitcher here, so that doesn't mean all that much. Just saying that he got dinged by this team the last time around. It's like citing BVP.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm overweight to the Tigers as a stack as well. Like, I think they're going to make sense for leverage on the other side because they're bad. Plesac's bad, but if you're playing Plesac in large field tournaments, it's really not problematic for me. I think he's somewhat safe on the low end. Looking at the other pitchers, I agree with you. I think Brubaker would be somebody to consider. Cole Ragans is on the slate. I tend to think he's probably pretty bad. I know he looked decent in his last start against the White Sox, but do you have any takes on him as a pitcher? Last time out was his first ever career start. I'm generally really low on guys that are career minor leaguers, a little bit older, not ranked as a prospect. Like, those guys very rarely end up being good pitchers. He was able to get through 5 shutout innings last time out against the White Sox. I was pretty heavy on White Sox stacks in that start. Honestly, no regrets. 5 innings, and he had 3 strikeouts and 4 walks, got a bunch of guys on base. He has 6.1 xFIP for the start, just ultimately didn't end up giving up runs. I think this guy sucks. So there might be some people that see like, hey, first major league start, pitch 5 shutout innings. I have no interest in him.
Yeah, I just pulled him back up to make sure it was the kid I was thinking it was from when I looked him up. There's been some new names and faces recently, and it is. He had a 4+ xFIP as a 24-year-old in AA this year. That just doesn't interest me when you bring that kid to the major league level. I'm just not going there. Low end strikeouts. There's just not enough here. If he starts to prove it, we see him stamp out a couple good starts in a row at the major league level, I'll reconsider the lefty. But for 7,200, especially on FanDuel, I don't see it. If you wanted to throw a couple of darts at 54 on DK, I'm sure that does buy you yet another bat beyond what like a Zach Plesac price can get you. So for the right bat, maybe on DK, but not a lot there. And you're going up against this ridiculously good Astros lineup. You're going up against it as a bad lefty. I just don't see it. I think he's going to get tattooed here.
Any other talking points for you at the pitching position? It's hard. I'm trying to stretch to talk about all these guys, but there's 12 pitchers on the slate, and most of them are kind of garbage.
Yeah, I mean, we talked up Framber on the other side. We talked about briefly about the Coors game, but we can go into that a little bit. Like coming into the season, I was kind of, singing Armand Marquez's praises. I've always, longed for the day that he gets himself out of Colorado and we can see what he can really do. But he has just largely not delivered all that much. He hasn't had the good Armand Marquez starts at Coors this year. And I don't like doing that when it's like, I'll go there if he's going up against the Marlins at Coors or the Pirates at Coors. Then you can go there. Then you can mess with it. But going up against this ridiculously good Cards lineup, like I just don't love it. He is only 1% owned, but it's a guy with an 18.6% strikeout rate pitching in Coors Field against a team that makes a ton of hard contact. I just don't love it. Same thing or not the same thing because he's not a good pitcher, but I don't see any reason to go to Dakota Hudson on the other side, regardless of the ownership, regardless of the price. Better matchup for him technically pitching against the Rockies, but I just think there's way less upside even than Armand Marquez. 12% strikeout rate, 10.4% walks for Dakota Hudson. Might be some good reasons to play some Rockies stacks there. Who else we got? Zach Greinke.
Yeah, there's going to be people that want to play Zach Greinke because for some reason, I always feel like there's a couple of people that come into chat like I'm playing Zach Greinke tonight, and I know he's had some okay starts this year. The one actual start where he was significant for DFS was that start he had against the Angels. But his numbers this year: 4.58 ERA, 5.42 expected ERA, 13.1% K rate. I can't ever get to him. He's cheap. The pitching options suck today. Could he put up like 10 fantasy points and maybe that's enough on a slate today as an SP2 on DK? I guess, but I have not rostered Zach Greinke once this year and I'm not going to start today.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that one. Don't think I've played him once and see no reason to go there today either.
Yeah, there we go. We've got, I knew there would be somebody, Brian Underwood. I'm one of them today at Greg, LOL. Well, at least he's laughing about it. If there was a slate where we're going to play Zach Greinke, 6-game slate where all the pitching options suck, and he says it's just in one lineup. Yeah, I mean, whatever. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to mock anybody who's going to play, a cheap pitcher who.
Sure. Look, we've
honestly
seen dumber plays than that win tournaments, right? So I mean, it's not completely crazy. It is a guy with some history and pedigree of being a great pitcher. Maybe he finds it one day. We do see guys do that from time to time. So hey, maybe the guy goes out and hits himself one. It sounds like he's doing it with eyes open if he's laughing about it too, which I think is probably the important part here. Know the kind of plays that you're making when you're playing those guys.
So there's only a 2-game baseball slate tonight, Terry. You know what else there is, though? Do you know there's a 2-game preseason slate? Were you aware of this? NFL preseason.
I was, because I think the Jets play tomorrow. Did the Giants play tonight?
You're the one wearing the Giants.
I know, right?
So.
I don't realize that.
I don't think so, though. I think we've got. Let's see, who are the teams playing NFL?
I was looking at it just yesterday, and I feel like I should remember, but yesterday was a long time ago.
Yeah, I was. I'm actually. I don't generally really play NFL preseason, but I'm thinking I'm going to reserve.
I got tempted and threw a
Oh,
couple
you know what?
It
is the Giants. We got the Giants and the Patriots and the Titans and the Ravens. So your hat, it's well placed for today. But the reason I was thinking I might reserve some entries is because I've been told that the DFS fields are pretty soft for preseason NFL DFS, primarily because a lot of people just play guys that are not active or not playing in the game. Mm-hmm. And the good news is, if you guys don't want to look for all that information, we've got you all covered. We've got preseason projections over at Stokastic.com, and we're giving them to you for just $5 right now for a limited time. So if you want to sign up right now and get access to NFL preseason slates and the projections we have for it, sign up using the promo code 2 at checkout. You'll get access to them for $5. Get stuff covered for tonight. We've got the 2-game preseason slate, a couple of showdown slates, and I'm sure there's going to be some value to be had there, just based on the fact there's going to be starting players that don't play, and the field's going to roster them anyway because it's preseason and nobody really knows what's going on. But Matt Gajewski's got us covered because he knows everything there is to know about football. He knows every NFL player, every backup NFL player, every backup NFL player. He knows every college player, every high school player. So he's got the goods for NFL preseason DFS. Just check out using the promo code TUA to get those projections for only $5. All right, let's move on.
That's why I ended up playing the first preseason slate the other day. I wasn't hadn't thought about it at all. And then I did a show, I think maybe you and maybe it was that day. And then right after that, it was Laffy and Gajewski, and they were just talking about the slate. And I pulled Matt's article up, and he's just got every single guy that I've never heard of listed and what their status is going to be. And he just has an amazing depth of information on it. So I'll probably get pulled back into that one too.
Yeah. And, so the other thing too with the preseason stuff is, like I played the first preseason slate. I don't usually play all that much preseason. I profited. You know what I did? Just ran our projections in Fantasy Cruncher and basically did nothing else. I don't know what the hell's going on with NFL preseason DFS. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also if you guys have any questions, throw them into the Discord channel. If you guys are a Stokastic premium user, we've got our Discord channel. Trying to encourage more people to leave us questions that we can answer in the Discord chat. And probably not all that surprising. We're getting more questions of late, most of them not related to baseball, but it's cool. I enjoy all of that as well. Anyway, if you guys have questions, at me in the Discord channel. But let's move on over to offenses, Terry. And, one thing that has happened as the show's gone on, our projected ownership has come down for the Coors Field game. Is that because the lineups haven't come out? Is it because of something else? Hard to know, because the Rockies are still projected for 16% ownership on DraftKings, but the Cardinals are down to 22% ownership, and they were at 27% when we started the show. It's a pretty significant dip. Over on FanDuel, we have the Cardinals projected for 20% ownership with 25% top stack odds. Are the Cardinals actually kind of getting a little bit overlooked in this spot now based on our ownership projection?
I tell you, that's a pretty big surprising dip. So I'm kind of interested in it. I'll be interested in seeing where exactly it goes. And if you're looking at the ownership that was up there, you had mid-20s on the top 3 hitters, but like Arenado was already at 18%. So if we're talking about Arenado slipping another couple percentage points, I'm super interested in that. And then, maybe you get a Paul DeJong fall a couple percentage points, Tommy Edman fall a couple more percentage points, to the point where these guys are actually technically in like that low-owned territory, or lower owned anyway. And if the top end stays around 20%, then I think you're dealing with a little bit of a change scenario there. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on over the next half hour or so.
Yeah. And right now, I mean, it's pretty rare we have a Coors Field situation like this where the top projected stack team on a smaller slate is also kind of positively leveraged. So I'm kind of inclined to just lean more into the Cardinals than I was planning on coming into the show. Maybe this is just a thing, like I said, people not knowing what the lineup is and maybe making them feel a little bit more like, hey, I don't know that I really want to load up on them. And they're still the most popular team on the slate, but we also have them as the top stack odds by a fairly significant margin. So I'm actually inclined to go overweight to the Cardinals right now. Is that kind of how you're leaning with it as well?
I'll see how it comes out in the sort. Right now, I don't even have lineups built at this point. I got about to click go on that. So I'll see how it comes out. But I mean, that would probably lead toward getting to more Cardinal stacks than I would have with the numbers the way that they were. So any dip in the ownership is going to push them the opposite direction just naturally through the sorting process. So yeah, and I'll be kind of excited to see them pop up now, where before, if I had seen Cardinals pop to the top of the list, I would have had to go in and tinker with some things and probably lower the exposure. Now I might just leave it alone where I get it. So
I mean, where I have them right now is I'm just gonna rerun lineups. I still need the Cardinals lineup to really finalize stuff.
That would be very helpful.
Yeah, it's really hard to upload those lineups, and because it's like, what's the point of uploading my lineups when I know I'm just gonna have to rerun them 20 minutes from now?
Exactly.
But I mean, the ideal scenario, and I'm actually curious, would you prefer the Cardinals lineup comes out now or after lock?
Honestly, probably after lock at this point, as long as I can get my lineups run. And I've got my, projected lineup that I have in here, and I'll run it with that. I might leave one or two other guys in there that I would want to fall into lineups because, like I said, we have some time to swap from this game after the fact. This game doesn't start till 3:10 Eastern time, so we've got 2 hours to play with the pairings and combinations in there if we do need to get away from guys. So I think it makes a ton of sense. Like you were saying that maybe you don't see Yachty out there, maybe you don't see one of the veterans like a Nolan Arenado or somebody out there. So you can work with some of the other pieces and get more shares of those guys into your lineups if you're doing it now. And then you have that impact of potentially lowering the ownership, potentially getting to plays that other people won't be making because of that lineup not being released.
Yeah, and rerunning my lineups right now. Let's see, how many Cardinals do I get to at the current projected ownership? I end up getting to 25% Cardinal stack, so a little bit overweight to the field. Nothing crazy, a little bit overweight, but I mean, that's my most rostered offense by a pretty good margin in the run I have right now, and I feel pretty good about that. Cardinals right now looks like one of those situations where the chalk is kind of warranted. And the same goes for the Colorado Rockies, another team that's really popular, but 16% ownership share over on DK, 18% chance to be a top stack. And then we go and check them out over on the FanDuel slate, and we've got them for 15% ownership, 18% top stack. Are we just loading up on Coors Field here, Terry? Is this one of the spots we're getting positive leverage on Coors? This almost never happens.
And it definitely never happens like when you and I are talking about a Coors Field game. Like, I feel like we're almost always talking about going the other way. In this one, I see pretty good reasons to go there. If these guys aren't going to be explosively popular, I mentioned it when I was talking about Dakota Hudson. He is not a good pitcher. 105 innings, a 12% strikeout rate, a 10% walk rate, a 4.93 xFIP. He doesn't give up a ton of home runs, but it's certainly easy to hit the ball hard against him. 43.7% hard hit rate, only a 1.81% home run rate. One would expect that there's a lot of noise in that number, and he's gotten a little lucky with the long ball. He keeps the ball down to a decent degree, but doesn't generate any swing and miss, doesn't generate any strikes. So a lot of contact available today, a lot of potential for the Rockies here, and they're efficiently owned at best, potentially maybe a little under owned. So I think there's some good spots to go to there. Brendan Rodgers at only 14%, Ryan McMahon at cleanup only 18%, under $5,000 on the DK slate, 3,400 on FanDuel is a good price. Grichuk at 15%, even the back end, like Jonathan Daza, 7.1% owned, 2,600 on DK. I can get to shares of him. He's hitting 299, 345, 367 this year. The run creation hasn't been great for him, but he can put the ball in play. He can get on base. So that's a sneaky potential for some correlated scoring. Sam Hilliard has a little bit of pop. We saw him homer last night, 169 plate appearances, only 2 home runs this year, and making a liar out of me with that, but a 48.1% hard hit, a 9.6% barrel rate. The guy can put good wood on the ball. So even him, I think there's a reason to go, from pretty much top to bottom with this Rockies lineup.
My top 10 most rostered hitters right now, Terry, are all in the Coors Field game. The top 10, my top 10 roster hitters are all right now either Cardinals or Rockies. Would you like to guess who the hitter is that's my most rostered non-Coors Field game player?
Most rostered non-Coors player. Ooh,
it's not going to be a hard one to figure.
Well, I don't have like the list of players in front of me.
Okay. It's Jose Ramirez.
Jose Ramirez. There you go. Thank you.
That's the guy not in Coors
I was trying
Field.
to jump to the page real quick where I just have everything sorted by like projection and the home run model count, so I could see just the list of stars. So it would have been Schwarber, Hoskins, Alvarez, Ramirez would have been my fourth guess if I was just reading off of that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it wasn't. Right. It was somebody I figured you would have got. It's not like I was asking you to guess some like random backup catcher that's 2K or whatever. Right. Like Jose Ramirez would have been one of the one of the more guesses. logical ones. But are we getting this lineup anytime soon? I hope not. I would like it to come out right after lock and nobody to adjust for Andrew Kanizer being in the lineup. Are you building your lineups right now assuming Kanizer's the catcher or Molina's the catcher or anything like that? Or are you just...
I've got them both in because neither one will come up all that much where if I've got to change 10 lineups from one guy to the other guy or change 10 lineups just from, one of those guys to something random, I'm fine with doing it. So they're both sitting in here right now.
Yeah. And by the way, Larry C has a question in chat. So I put in a secondary stack on Fantasy Cruncher, just do 5-man stacks. For DK purposes, I do 5-man stacks. For FanDuel, I do make secondary stacks. But for DK, because when you could get 5 men in, and I do think it's a little restrictive sometimes to force a 3-man stack coming back. A lot of my lineups will end up being, 5-2, or every once in a while there'll be 5-3s anyway. But I don't force it for DK purposes. FanDuel, I generally run 4-3 lineups. Terry, what have you been running lately? I know sometimes you do 4-3, sometimes 4-2-2. Do you have any hardened rule though?
Primarily, it's 4-4, 4-3s. I'll do full stack or full stack and 3-man and a 1-off on FanDuel. But I do let a decent number of oddball constructions come into the lineup builds where I'll let some 4-2-2s and some different like 3-3-2 and 1 different type of combinations. I'll let anything in there these days. And then the sorting process generally ends up boiling that down to a lot of 4-4s and 4-3s.
Yeah, and if you guys want access to all the tools, data, information we have over at Stokastic.com, if you're signing up for the first time, use the promo code MLB Live, all one word, all capital letters, and that is going to get you 50% off your first week of a Stokastic Plus Platinum membership. So stuff like the Top Stacks tool, Top Pitchers tool, which it's going to be changing, moving around as we get some of these lineups updated. As is, we've already seen some pretty big changes with the Cardinals ownership since we started the show, and there figures to be more once that lineup actually comes out. So really valuable information, helps me decide not just which players I want to play for baseball, but how much of each players I want to play, because that's also pretty significant. Almost everybody's going to be playing the Cardinals to some extent today, but go on 30% of a Cardinal stack, 10% of a Cardinal stack. Our tools help me decide all that information. And once again, you can get access to that using the promo code MLB Live for 50% off your first week of a Stokastic Plus Platinum membership. So Coors Fields, that's going to be where a lot of people's attention's on. We've talked about the merits of that. But Terry, if you had to roster one offense that was not at Coors Field today, what would be your offensive choice?
Let's see. This is where not preparing is kind of hurting me. I think probably the Astros, honestly, going up against Ragans, I think makes a ton of sense. You're going to one of the better lineups in baseball. They're not all that popular. I'm just looking at some of the numbers, particularly on DK, very low on a lot of single digits on the DK side, just cracking over 10 for some of these guys on the FanDuel slate, but they're super affordable on FanDuel. So that offsets a little bit of that. And going up against the guy we were talking about him before, had a 4+ xFIP in AA as a 24-year-old this year. I think that's a nice little target there.
I've been playing the White Sox a bunch in single entry. Hasn't gone particularly great as of late, but they keep getting these good matchups where people aren't really playing them all that much. So my primary stack today is going to be the Cardinals with their ownership coming down. But if I had to play one of the single owned offenses today, and the options we've got there over the ones that I think are viable anyway, it's really the White Sox, the Astros, the Phillies. Anything else then I think is probably a little bit thin for a single entry, or to really be the single entry team that I really want to be overweight to in any kind of considerable way. But the White Sox only project for 8% ownership. Zach Greinke, he has outperformed his peripheral stats this year. Maybe he's just smart enough and clever enough as a pitcher that we should consider that he could be a guy that could outperform his peripheral stats. But with that in mind, he's a 4.58 ERA and a 5.42 expected ERA. Even if we go like, okay, he should be outperforming his peripheral stats, even his ERA as is would have him as one of the worst pitchers on the slate, 13.8% K rate. The ball's going to be put in play against him. That always creates opportunities for offense, potential for home runs. The White Sox at low ownership, there's not that many low-owned teams that I really love getting to, especially when we are now getting an under-owned Coors Field game, at least per our ownership projections. So I'm looking at the White Sox as being the contrarian team once again that I like getting to. Could you try to talk me out of it, Terry, or does it make sense?
No, not only would I not want to, I don't know that I could. They're going up against Zach Greinke. It's just a great spot. Everything you said, tons of contact there, tons of run creation available there. To the ERA point, 4.61 xFIP. So his xFIP has been worse than his ERA, 13.1% strikeout rate. The ball's just in play. It's going to be hit pretty hard, 42.1% hard hit on the season, 3.03% home run rate. And it's a lineup I love getting to. Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, Jose Abreu, Yasmani Grandal, Moncada. Even Josh Harrison is interesting from time to time in there. Andrew Vaughn is very interesting from time to time. Decent amount of power hitting second. Not a lot of people going there for a decent price. So yeah, I like that lineup pretty much from 1 through 7, I would say. Lennon Sosa, Sebi Zavala down toward the bottom. Maybe you don't need him too much, although Sebi's been somewhat frisky, 272, 309, 395, creating runs at league average as a cheap catcher. I don't hate that.
Yeah, and also, for FanDuel, we would never have to play him. But DraftKings, where we have to play a catcher, he's pretty cheap. He's not popular. I mean, I'm overweight to just about every player in the White Sox lineup, which isn't that hard to do because the only player over 10% owned right now is Luis Robert. Other than that, everybody's, 10% or less. And these guys are fairly cheap also. You've got Jose Abreu and those guys. So Robert and Abreu, they both have, kind of significant price tags. Beyond that, though, Grandal is a catcher at 3,600. We've got Josh Harrison, 3,700. Jimenez is 4,400. Andrew Vaughn is 4,200. These are not restrictive price points, especially when the pitching at the high end isn't expensive today, which is kind of every slate now how it's gone. So it's not hard to fit in the top hitters in the lineup. It's contrarian. It fits in with the pitchers I like. So I think it's an easy team to get to, and I'll be overweight to them. Is there any team that you're looking at really low ownership that you like taking stabs on in large field tournaments? So this wouldn't necessarily be a single entry stack, but over the course of 150 lineups, if you had to pick one of these offense that's 5% or less owned, is there any that stands out to you?
In the 5% range, it looks like the Phillies I'm cheating a little because they're 6.7% if we're looking at DK ownership on the Phillies. But I think that one's kind of an interesting spot. You're just buying into some pretty premium bats going up against Edward Cabrera, who, like you mentioned, has some decent strikeout stuff, but has certainly not proven anything to me or any reason to go away from a Phillies team like this. So I think they're a little bit underowned and they're pretty affordable too. I mean, from top to bottom, Kyle Schwarber at $6,000 on DK is a little difficult, but then instantly everybody's 4,300 or less after him. On FanDuel, 37-38 for Schwarber and Hoskins, and then everybody else in the very cheap, affordable range, and not a ton of popularity after the first two hitters in the lineup. So I think the Phillies are an interesting spot there. And then outside of that, you're talking about some of the wacky ones. Like you could certainly argue into the few shares of like the good Pirates hitters against Merrill Kelly. He's not a threat to anybody. I wouldn't necessarily go to Texas just because of how Framber tends to shut things down with his ability to just induce ground ball after ground ball. So maybe I would cross them out. Detroit against Plesac. There's no reason they couldn't get to Zach Plesac. Like it's a day where it could just get ugly across the board. Handful of pitching points might do it. And any one of these pitchers, I think, is gettable. Like even Dylan Cease is gettable by that Royals offense. So I think it's a day to grab some shares of basically all of these teams. The Rangers might be my least favorite stack just because of the way that Framber pitches, even though I like Cease's upside better in terms of which pitcher we like better.
The Royals have about twice as much ownership as the Rangers, though. Like the Royals actually being owned is kind of weird to me. I know it's a smaller slate, but when do we have a clear top pitcher on a slate going up against a bad offense where the bad offense is 3.5% owned? So 3.5% ownership of the Royals on DK. Over on FanDuel, they are at a 1.4%. That's a pretty big difference. But at 3.5%, that's a tough offense for me to get to. Not that I'd be dying to play the Royals anyway, but That's a particular spot where I'm like, kind of surprised the field is getting there to that extent.
I do think there are some interesting bats in that lineup now. I mean, MJ Melendez, decent amount of power. Vincent Pascantino, decent prospect. Nick Pratto, good prospect, a lot of power. Sal Perez back in the lineup. It could definitely be one where you're just like, hey, I stacked a bunch of Royals and I ended up grabbing 2 solo shots, or like, 2 home runs, 3 total runs, and it's not going to really go off. It could easily be that kind of day. But there are a few interesting individual bats in there. Maybe they're a better source of one-offs for if you're looking for like, some super low owned one-offs with home run upside.
It's hard for me to say it. It's a 6-game slate. If anybody was playing something and be like, hey, leverage off Dylan Cease, I guess I could get that standpoint. It's too much ownership for me, though. If the Royals were like 1% owned, like they are on FanDuel, maybe a little more viable in large field tournaments, but no Royals for me.
Nick Pratto for the dead minimum at 1.3% ownership and multi-position first base and outfield. That's kind of interesting to me. Kid's got a 13.6% barrel rate over 83 plate appearances, 3 home runs so far, 217 ISO. That's kind of interesting. As a one-off for $2,000.
I don't know. Interesting is the right word. If he comes into lineup, so be it. But not really all that interested, to be honest.
Going out of your way for him. All right.
By the way, if you guys have any questions, throw those into chat. Throw them into Discord. Also, Terry, line up a home run pick. We'll do that in a second. But first, we talked about NFL preseason, how that's starting. But also, best ball season is underway. If you guys haven't checked out some of the stuff going on at Underdog, they have massive best ball contest this year, and we've got you covered with all the projections that we have over at Stokastic.com, where we've got Matt Savoca, Matt Kajeski, Nick Lepre, Lofty. They've been doing all kinds of best ball content for this season. But also, if you guys are signing up over at Underdog, make sure to sign up and check out all the tools we have, and also subscribe to our best ball and fantasy football channels, where you get even more just information and everything you need to make money over playing best ball. But we've also got signing up over at Underdog. If you sign up using the promo code Stokastic, I was making sure I had the right promo code. Sometimes we got the old site name as the promo code, sometimes the new. So just always want to make sure I'm reading everything, make sure we got the right one. If you sign up over at Underdog using the promo code Stokastic, you get a first match deposit bonus up to $100. So some free money there, but you also get access to our draft kit for free. So you get our draft kit, you get $100 from Underdog, and then also you get all the information you need to make some money in those best ball contests. Just make sure to sign up using that promo code Stokastic and get all of that included. That is a combined $170 value, and that could be yours for $100 first-time deposit over at Underdog. So good value to be had there. Terry, let's do some home run picks here, and then we could start to wrap up the show. So do you know who it is that you are picking to hit a dong today?
So top of the board, like I said, which I never really love to go to the chalkier guys at the top of the board. But once again, they've just been there again and again over the last week and change, and they keep delivering. Kyle Schwarber, Rhys Hoskins, 1-2 in the pure top of the board. Jordan Alvarez, Jose Ramirez right there. Is he in the lineup? I'll go down the board a little bit. Since I called out the Phillies earlier, let me just make sure I actually use somebody who's in the starting lineup. I'll go with Derek Hall. 4.4% owned on FanDuel, 5.7% on DK, 3,500 on DK, 34 on FanDuel, hitting cleanup for the Phillies today. 8 home runs and 112 plate appearances, a 321 ISO. That's a decent guy to potentially hit a home run. 19.7% barrel, 50% hard hit. Give me some Derek Hall.
All right. So I'm not going to take any of the Coors Field players. It always feels like cheating.
Yeah.
Unless I'm going to take like Andrew Kanizer, who I think is going to be crazy underowned at this point because the slate starts in 10 minutes and we don't have that Cardinals lineup yet. And I feel pretty good that he's going to be in it and Molina will rest. But not going to go that route.
Yeah, you don't typically play a 130-year-old catcher day game after a night game.
I'm going to look at the White Sox Royals game. I'm going to pick on Zach Greinke here. Yeah. I'm going to go with Eloy Jimenez, who didn't pick up any hits yesterday. Although with that said, he got robbed of an extra base hit that was nearly a homer on the final pitch of last night's game. And generally has been making a lot of hard contact as of late. I like the matchup against Zach Greinke, fairly low owned today, sub 10% on DK. He's also priced down relative to what he normally is. plus matchup considered. I'm gonna go with Eloy Jimenez as my home run pick. Any issues with that call, Terry?
No issues whatsoever. I love that pick. He's actually one spot below Derek Hall on my board here. He's number 8 overall on the board. Love the pick, love the hitter. 52.5% hard hit rate this season, 16.2% barrel. It's only translated into 6 home runs, but he's only made 140 plate appearances. So kind of forgotten star out there for the White Sox. But yeah, love Eloy Jimenez.
All right. Let me do one more Twitter search. See if there's anybody that's popped up and given us this Cardinals lineup, because I haven't seen anything yet. Still no Cardinals lineup. Yeah, no Cardinals lineup. All right, when that comes out, it's going to be a pretty big deal. But Terry, any other final thoughts on the slate? If not, we could head out of here right before lock.
I'm going to be really curious to see how that Coors ownership comes up in terms of, the actual when we hit, regardless of who's in those lineups. I think Tommy Edman is just interesting and sneaky down on the bottom, particularly on FanDuel, 3,700, shortstop and second base eligible. I know he's likely hitting down toward the bottom of the lineup, but if he's in there anywhere at single digit ownership, he hasn't had the greatest season, but he's a productive ball player. He's a guy who's typically correlating with the other guys in that lineup. So I'd be making sure to get to shares of him and then whoever else is under own there. And it's a both sides are at Coors Field. I can get to some Rockies bats here too. So it looks like a Corsey kind of day to me.
Yeah. Right now, 22% ownership for the Cardinals on DraftKings, 20% on FanDuel. Number's probably going to change once we get that Cardinals lineup, but we don't have it yet. If you guys want to see that ownership when it comes out, sign up for our Stokastic Plus Platinum membership. Use that promo code MLB Live to get 50% off your first week. Other than that, guys, thank you very much for watching. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Good luck today. Enjoy your night. Play some fantasy football tonight. NFL preseason DFS. Promo code 2 also get those projections for cheap. I'll just give out all the stuff here as we head out. Guys, thanks a lot for watching. See you tomorrow. Tyler, hit that music, which we're not going to be able to hear.